Hey there, writers and muse daters. I am super excited to be here today with Tasneem, who's going to share a bit about her journey to being an author, her journey to publication. Tasneem, thanks so much for being with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, I've known you for a while. I know what you're writing. Tell us what you're writing and why it's important to you.
I'm writing a novel. I've written my novel, and it is literary upmarket women's fiction or literary fiction, and magical realism. That's the sort of genre that I'm in with this novel. And why is it important to me? It's important to me on a number of levels. The protagonist, one of the main protagonists, is inspired by my grandmother and sort of generation of women that did, came from few means, but were ambitious for their future, for their children's future, and they were just gritty, in a time and in a culture and an era where they didn't have a lot of power. They didn't have a lot of social power, economic power, even within the home. They didn't have a whole lot of power. And so, that story and their determination, their ambition, which was, oftentimes larger than society would allow it to be, how it impacted the future generations. It's important to me also because my characters are part of my own community, my own diaspora community, my own cultural identity and religious identity, and it doesn't get a lot of sort of media attention, and so telling that story as well and through that lens was really important to me also.
That's amazing. And so, when we first met, this was not the book that you thought you were going to write. Talk a little bit about that transition into deciding that this is the book you were going to write.
Yeah. Wow, yeah, that was that was a fun time because I had been stuck in my head for so long and not really knowing where to write. This was during COVID when we were all in lockdown, and or just beyond that point, but in Toronto we were all still locked down. Um and I had for a while been trying to write a children's book, mainly for my kids, but just trying to write something of any substance. And what was coming out was a bit of a children's book. And so I thought, okay, well, that's what I have. That's what I'm doing. So that's what I brought to the table. And that wasn't, that's not what I want to be. I didn't want to be a children's author per se, or known for that. And I think it was like our very first meeting or something when you said, yeah, is this what you want to write? And I said, no, it's just what I happen to be writing right now. And I think there was one question that you asked, which is like, what is it that you're burning to talk about or to write about? And what is the thing in you that makes you want to write? And from almost nowhere, this sort of spilled out of my mouth, because it's not something that I knew even and had put on pen onto paper or outlined or thought about really in the sense of a novel. But when you ask the question, that's what came out. And as soon as I was saying the words, I was like, oh my God, that's it. That's the book. And then I think our conversation was like, well, why don't you just write that? And I said, can I write that? And you sort of gave me permission to put away the children's book and, write the thing that I actually wanted to write.
I talked to a lot of writers, and recently I've been spending some time with some visual artists who feel some of the same feelings around not being seen or appreciated for what their true art is, kind of having to, they use the term sell out, right? Like do what people like because that's what people like. But here you were in a situation where someone, you had, I'm not going to call it your sellout book, but the book that you thought would bring you some success or that might be okay to lead with, like maybe I'll
Mhm.
just try this. And then to have someone see, like, this isn't the thing that's on your heart. This isn't the thing that you really want to share with the world. How did that feel as a writer and as an artist?
I think it was I hadn't given myself permission to go for it. And part of that was just a lack of confidence on my part, a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding anything about the industry, anything about that, and not having the confidence in my own ability as an artist, and not having the sort of knowledge that I could do it, and I could do it well, because it's a big daunting project. And what I had was sort of small potatoes and easy, right? And I wasn't invested in it. It didn't really matter whether that children's book tanked or didn't tank, or got ever published or didn't, or if I self-published it, or if I traditionally, it didn't matter. It didn't have any real relevance. So there were no stakes with that one. Whereas with this, it was like, immediately it was validation. Like, yes, this is what's in my heart, but yes, there's a space for it. And sure, that's a story to tell, and people all care about stories when we want to tell them, and all kinds of stories. And it isn't that just because it's not a mainstream narrative, it doesn't have a place. Because if my rudimentary kind of very inarticulate way of thinking about that initial concept was landing with an industry professional who was saying back to me, yeah, you got to write that, that had a lot of weight, right? That wasn't just me telling a friend and the friend's like, yeah, go for it, right? It was like, yes, this is somebody within the industry who's like, that's you're clearly passionate about this. This is where you should write, and it will go somewhere.
So that was a great celebration that we had however many months ago when you
Mm-hmm.
made that decision, because that was a big choice
Mm-hmm.
for you. And you went from 0 pages, right? I mean, it was an idea, it was a seed in your mind at that point. Fast forward us through what happened next in terms of, you wrote the novel, we revised it to publishable, pull back the curtain. What did that work look like as we put that book together?
Probably some of the hardest work I've done. And not only because it was just sort of nose to the grind hard work, but it was emotionally hard work too. Because I think writing a book like this requires you to go places in your mind and in your heart that you wouldn't really otherwise do. It's a little bit of therapy rolled in there too. So that was a lot of work, a lot of grind. I wrote the book in about 4 months, 4 or 5 months, start to finish. And I revised it over the course of a year and a bit with you. So that was a long process. It was about a year and a half. And then we recently went back. And so, it's sort of this never ending process, but it was a year and a half of pure revision of that. And it was a lot of work, but it was probably the most gratifying work that I've done, right? I've done a lot of hard work that doesn't necessarily feel so gratifying at the end. But this was, every stage of it was gratifying. Every stage of it was growth at the end. And by the end of sort of revising that novel, and when I got to the last few chapters, I really felt like I had hit my groove, and sort of I knew how to do things. I knew how to edit, and I knew how to write. I had so many more sort of tools, that we call them tools in the toolbox, and sort of craft stuff under my belt. And I think I walked away with a really polished piece because of all of the work that I put into it.
Yeah, and I mean, talk a little bit about the difference that the support makes, because people might say, well, okay, I could write and revise a book in a year and a half. There are programs going on right now where you write a novel in a month.
Right.
Why bother to have somebody have your back on this?
Yeah. I think the difference for me was that it wasn't just a one size fits all. It wasn't a one-stop shop kind of, well, not one-stop shop. It wasn't a one size fits all. And it wasn't a sort of 1 month and you're done kind of situation. So a lot of the programs that are out, and there's a million of them, you pay a set fee, and it's generally affordable, but you get the same thing that 50 million other people get, and it's the same advice and it's the same, structure. There isn't a lot of personalization at all. And the thing with writing is that it is so personal, and all of our quirks and all of the ways in which we write are different, and all of our stories are different, our genres are different. But having, and so we're, the same advice is not going to work for me as it works for, the other people, even within the same writing gym community. So, much less tons of millions of others. And then also that the program is as long as you need it to be, right? It isn't like you're done after a month, right? Or you're done after a certain amount of time. It's sort of like, well, if you're going to get through this process, and however long you need to get through this process, it's going to be there piece by piece. And I think, being in there for the long haul matters, because this is a long project. Like, I was writing a novel. I wasn't writing just one quick short story. And so being able to develop that ability to get through it, week after week after week, month after month after month, and not put it away. Like, it sort of, it wasn't a trend or a fad or a passing fancy, right? It really was like, this is what I want to do. And so I had to have longevity in the work that I was doing. And so I think that's one of the main differences, is that, some of these programs are just really short, and that's fine. You get some understanding, but you don't really know where to go and how to do it, and, where you take it from there. There's a huge amount of independence that, as a very fledgling writer and editor, I didn't have the ability to do. So I think the support, and especially I think the mindset support, really helped, because, as I said, it can really get in your head, all of the voices telling you to stop and telling you this isn't going to go anywhere and it's not worth it and blah blah blah. And the mindset piece was really, really key.
That's amazing. And so fast forward, you're at the end. We've got a publishable novel. We've put together your pitch materials. So one of the heartbreakers for me right now in a lot of these online groups is that I'll see people post like, "Hey guys, I wrote a novel. How do I get a literary agent?" And they're asking that question with the same spirit of like, "Where can I buy a coffee near me?" Like, it's just sort of this, oh, you just drive down the street and there it is, and then you have a coffee. But no, getting a literary agent, especially in this day and age, to get their attention is not easy. Talk about your experience and why that statement is true for you.
It's 1,000% true. Getting an agent is so much harder than I ever anticipated it would be from the outside, before, learning anything about the publishing industry. And that is the truth. It is I don't know who these miracle unicorns are that get them on the first try, or whatever, but they really are the unicorns. Because it's tough. You have to be almost perfect in your materials, and you have to be very clear as to what you have in your materials, like your query letter and all that. You have to know the lingo, you have to know the terminology, you have to give them exactly what they want, and you have to grab them in like the first 30 seconds of them reading anything of yours. Otherwise, forget it, because they get hundreds of queries and all of that. So it's like, just getting somebody to read a couple of pages of your work is a success. I was querying. I mean, most agents don't even get back to you. So sometimes they do, and that's great when they do. And if they do, and if they give you, if they do, then it's sort of like, okay, sorry, it's not for me. Great. If they do, and it's even rarer for them to actually give you any kind of feedback. Very rare. So, that's a little bit more of a unicorn, but that helps if they do that. And then, somebody who wants sort of a full manuscript, so somebody who wants to read your whole thing, that's really, really rare. And then hopefully that kind of gets you in the door, but even that's not a guarantee of anything. So it's a tough road. It's a tough road out there.
Yeah, and because you're a member of the writing gym and you have completed our publishing boot camp where you put together all of your query materials, recently we had an online writing retreat and you were able to sit down with several literary agents, more than one, and have a full 15-minute conversation about your work, to get some feedback, to actually have a conversation about genre and the industry versus being ghosted and getting no response.
Right.
How does that feel different?
Yeah, that was great. I've attended a few of these your online retreats, and there's always one or two agents there, and we always, and I think I've signed up for a pitch every single time, and that experience is invaluable because these are people that have no real vested interest in me. Um, it's no sweat off their back what I do with my life and whether I write anything or not, right? So for them to show any level of genuine interest in what I'm writing and how I'm writing it and what stage I'm in is so gratifying. It's so gratifying. And so yeah, I sat down with an agent at this retreat, and she right away got my concept. She got the idea right away. She was in there with me. We had an amazing conversation for the 15 minutes that we were there. Um, and yeah, and she asked for a copy of my manuscript at the end, which was really, really exciting. So yeah, I'm really psyched to do that. And she also in that gave me some advice in terms of, what the word count needs to be and a couple of other things. And she even said to me, don't even give it to me right now. Give it to me, like get all of this stuff done, and then I want to see it. So I want to see kind of like your perfect product, which again gives me this insight, right? That this person isn't going to want a sort of big long back and forth. They want to see the best thing you have. So, make sure it is 1001% the best thing you can put together, and then give it to her. Um, so again, that's good insight. That's good to know too, right? That people don't want something that's not that it was half-assed. I mean, it's still a polished product, but they don't want something where you can go back and make more changes and make it better. You should have already made it better before, you give it to them. So um yeah, so that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, this is amazing, and I'm so celebrating you and this victory. And I'm also thinking about, that person who just posts in a group like, "Hey guys, how do I find a literary agent?" Like it's as easy as getting a cup of coffee down the street. And this experience that you've had where you had a polished manuscript, but you still couldn't get your foot in the door, never mind being in the room and being in conversation. There's a huge divide there in terms of what writers know about what it's really like and what it actually is. And I think, I speak at writing conferences all over the world, and I can't tell you how many times that I've heard this uh, pitch like, "Oh, it's completely different from anything out there. Nobody's ever written a book like this, and agents are just going to want it based on its merit."
Right.
Well, I mean, if we all had fairy godmothers, that would be an
Yeah.
amazing thing to have happen for us. But look, you and I danced around genre for a number of months. I was on the phone with dozens of literary agents, publishers, acquisitions editors to say, "Look, I've got this piece that's a little bit unique. What's the best pitching angle? What genre would you put it in?" And we got, I don't know, 24, 48 different answers in terms of what the answer to that question was. So we knew that we had something that was unique, that had a market position that was very different from anything that was out there. But that didn't make it, it wasn't sort of like, "Oh, you've got something different, come on in." I've just thrown like a bunch of factors out there. What's coming up for you as I talk about the real experience of getting a literary agent?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? Is that sometimes you know exactly what you're writing and you know exactly what genre you're in, and you can follow those conventions, and either while you're writing or while you're editing and revising, and you don't have this issue, and you can place your novel within a context. Um, with me, it was, as you said, it was completely different because I really did have a bit of a different, set of genres that this could technically fit in. And it was really hard. It was really unnerving. And it gave me so much anxiety for a long time because I knew that agents and publishers need to put your book on a shelf. It's not going to sit there on a shelf of its own. It's got to go on a shelf, and it's got to go in a roster of similar type books, right? There's a marketing angle that has to go along with it. And I also knew within this program, from this program, that um, it's not up to them to figure that out. It's up to me to figure that out and pitch it that way. Like, I have to actually do the work and do the imaginative piece for them and tell them where it goes. And if I didn't know where it went and I didn't have solid comps because this thing was such a unique fish, um, how am I going to get an agent to separate me from the rest of the world who is like, I have a really novel book, and they don't, they just haven't figured out how to do the comps. So, and at the same time, yes, my idea was unique or my novel was unique, but I also knew I had to find the comps. And so we worked really hard, and I worked really hard. I found a lot of angles, and at the end of the day, we turned it into a strength. And I think that was also really gratifying for me, is being able to turn it into a strength, to be able to say, okay, if there's an agent who's really into magical realism, we play up the magical realism, right? And not that we make it into something it's not, but we talk about the magical realism angle of it more, right? And get them excited about that part of the book. Because you can market it that way. And if you have somebody who's really into book club fiction and, upmarket women's fiction, we market it that way because it does fit that category as well. And the magical realism is sort of the uniqueness of it, but it's sort of, that's okay. Doesn't matter. The piece that we can market the heck out of is that this is great for all of your book clubs. And this is great for, the upmarket women's category. So having that, yes, there's another angle on there, which is that you have to really know who you're pitching. And you have to know that the people you're pitching are going to want one or the other, or one thing or the other thing, right? And so that puts another element of, this could land or totally not land just because I used the wrong pitch, right? Yeah.
Well, and I hear you listing off all of this jargon, the vocabulary of
Yeah.
publishing, and I'm so proud of you, right? Because when we first met, you didn't know these words or how
Anyway.
to use them or what they meant, and right, but now you're in it and you understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you can talk about it in this very knowledgeable way because you know what you're doing. And I think about the writing gym program, which is really soup to nuts, right? It's not just come in, we're going to teach you some dialogue. Come in, we're going to teach you, right? It's come in with an idea. We're going to show you how to write a publishable first draft. Then we're going to teach you how to revise it. Then we're going to teach you how to pitch it. And then we're going to teach you all the skills that you need. I mean, everything that you just talked about. And we're going to have your back the whole way, soup to nuts. What difference does it make? Because not even MFA programs in creative writing are teaching people every single step to become an author, right?
Right.
That's what the writing gym does, is it gives you the author lifestyle. Whatever that means for you, we're getting you to that goal. What difference did that make for you personally to have everything in one place?
Well, I think it was good. I mean, I think it was helpful to be able to, have this one community, this one place that was going to see me through. And so I wasn't sort of left hanging. And I think that's the hard part with a lot of the programs that are out there, that you can be left hanging. Okay, you wrote it, now what? Okay, you revised it, now what? And I never had to really ask now what, because, I always knew what was coming next. And I knew start to finish, that I wrote it, I edited it, I marketed it. And I knew I could, sort of, it's like having a baby, right? Like you have this baby, and you grow it, you develop it, you give birth to it, you sort of off you go. But it's like, it really is like bringing this baby into the world, and my book baby. But also, having the support to be able to just nourish it and send it on its way, as opposed to having it left hanging. Or then I'm left figuring out, okay, now where do I go? Now where do I go? Now where do I go? Because there's a lot of noise in this space, and there's a lot of noise in this industry, and there are a lot of people who want your money, and there are a lot of people who claim to kind of get you there. And you and I know we've talked about a run-in I had in the spring, with someone there that I told you about. And like, I'm so glad that I stayed the heck away from that, because it's, somebody who seemed to have a whole bunch of credentials and was popping up on, in some conferences and some places, but that was like a danger zone. This person was a danger zone, and I'm so glad I knew enough to stay away from there, um, and had this place to come back to, which is really legit. And that made a big difference, because if it didn't, I could have been sucked in, right? So, and I mean, even though I'm graduated from the program, I'm still here, I'm still around, I'm still there. And I know that if something comes up with this agent, and who wants my manuscript, and if she does like the novel, so fingers crossed, send your good vibes my way, that if she does want it, like, I can hopefully come back and like really talk about it and make sure it's the best way forward. And as we go forward, and I have more books under my belt, right? It's sort of, yeah, it's nice to have a home, I guess.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, Tasneem, you are uniquely positioned as someone who's gone through the program to talk about, you use the word legit, right? And you've seen what some of the other offerings out there that are more scams, not necessarily delivering on what they're promising. So how do you know that this is the real deal? You haven't published your book yet. How do you know?
I didn't in the beginning. I did take a leap of faith in the beginning. But I do now, because there's a lot out there. Like there's people that have been published that have been through the program, and they're all on the website in that success stories tab on your website. And so I know people that are, that are getting published. It's not like this program exists in a vacuum. So there are lots of people that have been published and are getting published um, through this program. So that's one. And then before I knew really about the success stories and that piece on the website, there were all the podcasts, and there's like a gazillion episodes of your podcast, which I had been listening to. And there's a whole bunch of authors on these podcasts who've been published, and not just authors, but then what I really was interested in and was listening to a lot of were the podcasts with the industry professionals. So with agents, with people at publishing houses and acquisitions peoples and things like that. And you were having podcasts, like even if it was just a half an hour sort of podcast with these people. So it was clear to me through that, I was like, okay, this is somebody who's connected to the industry. This is somebody who's been successful in getting other people published. And those two things put together gave me a lot of faith, because then I knew, like, I'm dealing with somebody who knows what they're doing, and is connected and respected in the industry. And then when we had these online retreats as well, having agents who are working within the industry come in, I think that adds a measure of another layer of credibility and legitimacy to the program as well. Because why would an agent give up any of their time for somebody that they've never heard of and a program that they know nothing about? So, and they've been slightly different, agents every time. So that already again tells me that yes, this is legitimate, right? It's not just the proof is in the pudding. There's people getting published. There's all of these industry professionals that are talking to you and imparting their wisdom and having these wonderful conversations. There's agents attending these retreats. So yeah, all of that put together wasn't really a question anymore in my mind.
This is so amazing, Tasneem, and getting back what we're here for, to celebrate you, your amazing accomplishments, having this amazing conversation with the literary agent, having her ask for pages, having her take a deep dive into what it is that you're doing, really take an interest in you as a writer, right? She gave you advice above and beyond about your manuscript, but about, where you live and being engaged in writing communities. This is all huge in terms of this next big step that you are taking toward living the author lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was really interesting because there was another agent that I pitched to, and I know this isn't that my pitch fell flat, and I know we're celebrating, and I really think that this is a celebration too, because kind of back to where we were talking about earlier with not knowing about the genres and what pitch is going to land where with an agent if you don't know as much about them. And this was an agent, this was a second agent who I also pitched to, and I knew about her whatever was available on the internet to know about her, right? Like I'd done the searches and found whatever information there was. But I could never have anticipated that my pitch, which was so successful the day before with one agent, would fall so flat with this other agent, and who just completely did not understand what I was talking about, had no idea what my concept was really, and just kept saying, like, what's this? What do you like? What is the story? What is this? And started talking to me about, the own voices and things like that, until she realized, this is an own voices story. And it just didn't land. It didn't connect. It didn't land. And I think it's a celebration too, because I look at that and I think, okay, this was somebody who didn't understand the concept and the pitch as I had prepared it, right? But it kind of just brings us back to this conversation about not necessarily having just one pitch, and agents not being one size fits all either, and the genre being a little bit fluid in my case. And so if I had been better at anticipating with this agent, I would have prepped a totally different kind of pitch, or pivoted to a different kind of pitch that was a little more conventional with that agent. And she still gave me a really good amount of feedback on the pitch, and she was open to reading a few chapters. So even though the pitch didn't land, because I was at the retreat and because I had signed up to pitch with her, she still offered to read a few chapters. So I think that was amazing, because somebody who doesn't get your concept and doesn't, really understand what you're doing, or doesn't feel it, or whatever the reason is for them turning away, for them to still say that they want to read a little bit of what you've got, I think is a big deal.
That's amazing. What an amazing celebration. And the fact that you can frame it that way, right? Because so many writers think, oh, I'm just getting rejections. Nobody likes my work, right? And going back to what you said earlier about the mindset work, like really being able to see that it's great if they say yes, and it's great if they say no.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
I love that for you. So, Tasneem, as people are listening out there and thinking, well, okay, it worked for Tasneem, but I don't know about this writing gym thing. Is it going to work for me, for my novel, for my genre? What advice do you have for that person out there listening?
I would say just book a call and figure it out. Like, try. You won't know unless you try, because everybody in this program writes something different. And I could never write, well, I shouldn't say never, but it's not my jam to write a lot of the stuff that other people are writing. I don't write horror. for example, but I mean, you've successfully put other people through who write in that category and are now published in that category. And so, that's, I think it doesn't really matter what you write. It doesn't really matter what genre you write. Writing has to have a certain level of quality to it in order to be traditionally published. And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you're writing. If you're wondering whether the program is right for you, the only way to find out is to investigate and to, book the call and understand what it involves, and all of the fine print. But in terms of kind of what you write and all of that, I would say it doesn't matter in the least. We all write different things. Nobody else writes what I'm writing, and I don't write what anybody else is writing, and that's fine.
Wonderful. Well, Tasneem, we are all behind you and so proud of you. I am so proud of you and the work you've done. And I was telling you before we hopped on here, I mean, I've already been talking about your novel to folks in the industry, outside of the industry, as if it's a done deal, because we're on that road now, and here we go. So proud of you. Thank you for sharing your journey today and celebrating with us here in the Writing Gym.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This has been really great. Thank you.
Until next time, we wish everyone happy writing.